Foster kids, when did the other kids save your life? I was getting ready for bed at the group home when my glucose monitor started screaming. Mrs. Wong appeared in my doorway, inspection clipboard in hand. Everyone, lights out. State review is tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and I'm not having any incidents tonight. But my monitor showed 58 and dropping. Mrs. Wong, I need my emergency glucose tablets. It's real. She laughed. Nice try. Every inspection, one of you pulls a medical stunt. Trying to sabotage my bonus? She walked to the medicine cabinet and pocketed the key. Nobody touches these until after my review tomorrow. Anyone who tries gets sent back to juvie. I know when kids are faking for attention. I knew I had to act fast. I dove for my mattress where I'd hidden backup glucose gel. Mrs. Wong grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave marks. What did I just say? She found the gel and threw it in her pocket. Contraband. That's a write-up. My hands started shaking uncontrollably. The monitor beeped again. 48. Bradley, my roommate who usually shoved me around, sat up. Yo, something's actually wrong with him. Look at all that sweat. Back to bed, Bradley. Don't enable his manipulation. Mrs. Wong crossed her arms. I stumbled toward the medicine cabinet, vision blurring. Just the glucose tablets, please. I'm going to pass out. She blocked the cabinet with her whole body. You want me to lose my perfect record? My evaluation is flawless. 0 medical incidents this quarter. My knees buckled. The tile floor felt like ice against my skin. I started crawling toward her office where I knew she kept juice boxes. Where do you think you're going? She stepped on my fingers. I felt something crack. The pain shot up my arm, but the glucose crash made everything distant, like I was underwater. The monitor screamed 42. Shakira, the quiet one, crept into the hallway. Should we call 911? Mrs. Wong yanked the house phone off the wall, unplugging it. Anyone who calls anyone gets transferred to the detention center. I'll personally make sure of it. My legs started giving out. Jordan, the rebellious one, ran to the kitchen. There's got to be juice or candy somewhere. Kitchen's locked too. She dangled her keyring. You think I haven't dealt with faker diabetics before? Terrell, the worst bully, actually looked scared. His lips are literally turning blue. That's not normal. Drama class auditions were last week. Mrs. Wong sneered. The monitor hit 38. I had maybe 7 minutes before I'd be unconscious. My tongue felt swollen, filling my mouth. I couldn't form words anymore, but I had to try something. I dragged myself to the bathroom, thinking maybe I could drink from the tap, get any sugar from toothpaste, anything. Mrs. Wong followed me. Pathetic. She kicked the toothpaste out of reach. Your mother tried this same act last year, claimed you were chronically ill. I showed her the door too. That's when Bradley stood up. If he dies, that's on you. We're all witnesses. Mrs. Wong laughed. Who believes foster kids over a veteran caregiver with 15 years experience? I collapsed against the wall. 4 minutes left. My vision was going dark at the edges. I could taste metal in my mouth. My chest felt like someone was sitting on it. I reached for her ankle, tried to pull myself up, but she shook me off like a bug. Don't touch me with your dirty hands. Kiara, do the thing, Shakira whispered. The anxious 9-year-old started hyperventilating on purpose. I can't breathe. I'm having a panic attack. When Mrs. Wong rushed over annoyed, Jordan's hand shot out and snatched her cell from her back pocket. Thief! She spun around, but Jordan had already tossed it to Bradley. The monitor screamed 30. That's when Terrell did something I'll never forget. He scooped me up like I weighed nothing. Everyone move! He bulldozed toward the door. 911, foster kid, diabetic emergency, supervisor won't give medicine, Bradley yelled into his hidden phone. Mrs. Wong tried grabbing Terrell's shirt, but 5 other kids formed a human wall. Even little Kiara stood firm. You're all going to pay for this. Your records will follow you forever. They carried me to the front lawn. Someone shoved hidden candy into my mouth. The last thing I remember was sirens getting closer and Mrs. Wong screaming about her ruined evaluation while the other kids held her back from reaching me. But that wasn't the last time I'd see her face. I woke up to a paramedic saying blood sugar was 26. Another minute or two and we'd have lost him. The police were already there and Shakira had been recording everything on an old iPod she'd hidden. Mrs. Wong was demanding to speak to her supervisor while they cuffed her. But here's what really got her. Every kid had stories. Jordan's seizure meds went missing. Kiara's anxiety pills were deemed unnecessary. Bradley's inhaler was locked up for overuse. The investigation revealed she'd been pocketing medication money for years, claiming we were all drug-seeking while collecting bonuses for low medical costs. She got 8 years for child endangerment and embezzlement. But 8 years wasn't enough for me. Not after she almost let me die. And Mrs. Wong made one mistake that night. She forgot that foster kids grow up and remember everything. And some of us, we come back. 8 years passed before I saw her name again, printed on an official parole board notice that showed up in my email on a Tuesday morning while I was eating breakfast. My hands started shaking the same way they did that night, coffee mug rattling against the table as I read the words twice, 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Patricia Wong, inmate number 47,892, scheduled for early release consideration next month due to good behavior and prison overcrowding. The scrambled eggs turned to paste in my mouth and I pushed the plate away, stomach churning while my glucose monitor beeped its morning reminder. I grabbed the test kit from my kitchen counter where I keep it next to the coffee maker, pricked my finger with practiced ease, and watched the number appear. 118, perfectly normal, but my body didn't believe it. Every evening at exactly 7 p.m., I check my levels and take my insulin, a ritual that's become as sacred as prayer because I know what happens when the numbers drop. My fingers still remember the cold tile, my tongue still knows that swollen feeling, and even now when my glucose dips below 70, my whole body floods with panic that has nothing to do with the actual danger. The trauma lives lives in my cells, coded into my DNA alongside the diabetes, twin conditions I'll carry forever. I kept Bradley's number saved in my phone all these years, but never called it, not once, until that morning when I scrolled through my contacts and hit dial before I could lose my nerve. He answered on the fourth ring, voice careful and guarded like he wasn't sure who was calling or why. When I said Wong's name and mentioned the parole hearing, the line went quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then he cleared his throat and said, "Yeah, we should probably talk about that." That night I woke up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat, my dream brain taking me back to that bathroom floor, fingers going numb under her shoe, the taste of metal filling my mouth while my vision went dark at the edges. I fumbled for my glucose monitor on the nightstand, checked the number even though I knew it was fine, 92, stable, safe, but my body was still back there on those cold tiles thinking it was dying. Some nights are like that, where the past reaches through time and grabs me by the throat, making me relive the countdown to unconsciousness. The next morning, I drove to the hospital records department and filled out the forms to request my emergency room file from that night, paid the $25 processing fee, and waited while the clerk printed everything out. The paperwork came in a manila folder, pages and pages of medical jargon, but there it was in black and white. Blood glucose 26 milligrams per deciliter on arrival, critical hypoglycemia, patient unresponsive. Seeing it written down made it real again. Not just a bad memory, but documented proof that I almost died while she stood there and watched. I found Shakira on Facebook, her profile picture showing her with 2 kids and a tired smile, and sent her a message asking if she still had that old iPod recording from that night. She replied within 2 hours, said she'd converted all the files to digital years ago and backed them up in 3 different places because she knew this day would come eventually. We both knew Wong would try to get out early, and we both knew we couldn't let that happen without a fight. Sitting in my apartment that evening, insulin pen in hand, I made a decision that went bigger than just keeping her locked up. The whole system that created her, that paid bonuses for denying medicine to sick kids, that rewarded cruelty with cash, needed to burn to the ground. Wong was just one tumor in a body full of cancer, and cutting her out wasn't enough if the disease kept spreading. My juvenile record worried me though. Those 6 months in detention after I got caught stealing food from a grocery store, too scared of going hungry to think about consequences. They'd probably dig that up, use it to paint me as a troubled kid who grew into an unreliable adult, anything to protect their broken system. I created a WhatsApp group and added Jordan, Terrell, Kiara, Bradley, and Shakira, typing out a simple message about Wong's parole and asking who wanted to help stop it. Jordan responded within minutes with a string of angry emojis. Shakira sent a thumbs up. Bradley wrote, "I'm in," but Terrell took 3 days to reply, and when he did, it was just to say he wanted nothing to do with courts or lawyers. Kiara didn't respond at all for a week, then sent a long message about her anxiety and how she wasn't sure she could handle reliving everything, and I told her I understood completely. We set up a video call for the following Saturday, those of us who were willing to fight and split up the work based on what each person could handle without breaking. I'm finding it really interesting how Mrs. Wong seems to care more about her perfect evaluation score than the kid's actual health right now. There's something off about a caregiver who locks up medicine during an inspection. Makes me wonder what she's trying to hide from the state reviewers, besides just wanting that bonus she mentioned. Shakira would organize and edit all the recordings, creating a timeline of that night with timestamps and audio clips. Jordan volunteered to gather medical records from everyone, tracking down documentation of all the medications Wong denied us over the years. Bradley said he'd try to find contact information for other kids who'd lived in the home before and after us, building a bigger picture of the pattern. We were building a case piece by piece, not just against Wong, but against the whole rotten system that let her thrive. 3 days later, I took the long way home from work and ended up on Maple Street without planning it. The old group home sat there with fresh yellow paint and a bright sign reading Sunshine Day Care, where the state placard used to be. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel, and my chest got so tight I couldn't breathe right. I pulled into the parking lot across the street and sat there for 20 minutes just staring at those windows where we used to watch for social workers. Kids were playing in the yard now with bright plastic toys scattered everywhere, and teachers watching them carefully. The same door Wong dragged me through that night now had cartoon animals painted around it. My glucose monitor beat, and I checked it automatically, even though I knew I was fine at 102. The panic attack passed slowly, while I did the breathing exercises my therapist taught me, but that building still had its claws in me. The next morning, I went to the free clinic downtown for my regular checkup and asked the receptionist about counseling services. She sent me down the hall to a small office where Yara Haddad sat behind a desk covered in papers and stress toys. I told her about Wong's parole hearing coming up and how the memories were getting worse every night. She showed me this grounding technique where you name 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. We practiced it right there in her office until my hands stopped shaking and my breathing slowed down. She gave me a card with her direct number and told me to call anytime the flashbacks got bad. That afternoon, I went to 3 different stores buying glucose tablets and gel packets to stash everywhere. 2 packs went in my car's glove box, another set in the center console, and 1 under the driver's seat. My backpack got 4 tubes of glucose gel in different pockets, plus tablets in the front pouch. Every jacket I owned got supplies stuffed stuffed in the pockets, and I put extras in my desk drawer at work. I programmed my phone with 3 different glucose reminder alarms and shared my location with Bradley and Shakira permanently. They both knew my emergency protocol now and had copies of my medical information saved in their phones. Never again would someone's greed leave me helpless when my sugar crashed. That evening, I sat at my computer researching local journalists who covered foster care stories. Diego Alvarez kept coming up with articles about group home problems and state oversight failures. His email was listed at the bottom of his articles, so I started typing a message to him. I kept it short and professional, just dates and names and a mention that we had video evidence from that night. No emotional stuff, no sob story, just facts he could verify. I hit send before I could second guess myself and closed the laptop. 4 days later, the mail carrier knocked on my door with a certified letter I had to sign for. The return address was the state parole board, and my stomach dropped before I even opened it. The official notice said Wong's hearing was scheduled for exactly 4 weeks from today at 9 a.m. The date felt both too close and too far away at the same time. My hands got sweaty just holding the paper, and I had to sit down because the room started spinning. 4 weeks to prepare, 4 weeks to gather everything, 4 weeks until she might walk free. I spread out all my bills on the kitchen table that night and started doing math on a notepad. Taking time off work for the hearing would cost me 2 days' pay minimum. Gas to drive to the state capitol and back would be about $60. Copying all the documents would probably run $30 or $40 at the print shop. If I needed a lawyer to look things over, that could be hundreds more. My savings account had enough, but barely, and this would wipe out my emergency fund completely. Some things matter more than money, though, and keeping her locked up was worth going broke for. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office downtown and waited in line for an hour. The clerk behind the bulletproof glass looked bored when I asked for my complete case file from the group home. She typed on her computer for a while, then slid a form under the window. The fees were way higher than I expected, almost $200 just for copying. She warned me that child welfare records usually came back mostly blacked out for privacy reasons. I paid anyway, and she said it would take 2 to 3 weeks for processing. While waiting for my receipt, I checked my phone and saw the agency had posted something on their website. The statement talked about their improved safety protocols and industry-leading efficiency in managing youth services. At the bottom was Seun Adebayo's signature as the current administrator defending the same system that almost killed me. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt, and I had to walk around the block 3 times to calm down. These people were still lying, still covering up, still protecting themselves instead of kids. 2 days later, Diego messaged me asking if we could meet to discuss my email. We picked a coffee shop downtown, and I got there early to pick a corner table where nobody could hear us. He showed up right on time with a notebook and recorder, professional but clearly interested after I'd sent him a clip from Shakira's iPod. He asked careful questions about that night, about the other kids, about the investigation afterward. I showed him some of the documents I had, and he took photos of everything with his phone. He promised to verify everything independently through public records and other sources before writing anything. This might actually turn into something real, not just another buried complaint. A week and a half later, a thick envelope arrived from the county clerk's office. I opened it at my kitchen table and found my case file, or what was left of it after the censors got done. Entire pages were blocked out with thick black marker, sometimes leaving only a date or case number visible. But between all the redactions, I could still see patterns forming. Multiple complaints filed by different staff members, all marked unsubstantiated or resolved internally without any real investigation. Notes about behavioral issues that happened right after medication requests were denied. The cover-up was obvious, even in what they tried to hide from me. That night, I stayed up late searching through the agency's public budget reports on their website, clicking through endless PDF files until my eyes burned. The numbers jumped out at me when I finally found the right years. Medication expenses dropping from $80,000 to $48,000 right when Wong took over, then staying low for her whole time there. I screenshot everything and saved it to 3 different folders because this was proof, real proof, that our suffering turned into money for them. The next morning, I found Seun Adebayo's direct number on the agency website and called his office, my hands shaking a little as the phone rang. His secretary put me through after I said I was a former resident with questions about current policies, and Adebayo's voice came on smooth and professional. Privacy concerns prevent me from discussing specific cases, he said, when I asked about medication access protocols. I pushed harder, asking if supervisors still got bonuses for low medical costs, and he started talking in circles about ongoing improvements and industry standards before cutting me off mid-sentence. "I'm afraid I have another meeting," he said, and hung up before I could respond. My glucose monitor beeped while I was organizing all the documents on my laptop, showing 65 and dropping fast from all the stress. I grabbed my glucose tabs from my backpack and chewed 3 of them quickly, the chalky orange taste familiar after all these years. The shaking started in my hands first, then spread up my arms, and I had to sit on the floor until the sugar kicked in and brought me back to normal. My phone buzzed with a text from Terrell agreeing to meet, but only at the park by the river, nowhere near any government buildings. When I got there 2 days later, he was already waiting on a bench, built like a linebacker now, with arms thick as tree trunks. "I'm not testifying," he said right away, not even saying hello first. He told me about his seizures coming back bad after years without proper medication, how he still gets them sometimes when he's stressed. "But I wanted you to know it wasn't just you," he said, then got up and left without looking back. Shakira messaged me that night with screenshots she'd pulled from old files, metadata showing Wong had denied medication requests at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning on multiple nights. The timestamps painted a clear picture of kids lying awake sick and hurting while Wong slept comfortable in her apartment down the street. I started posting in foster care survivor forums online, sharing pieces of our story without using real names yet. Within hours, someone messaged me privately from a group home 2 counties over, same agency network, same story about medication being locked up and bonuses being paid. Their supervisor got promoted instead of arrested, now running 3 homes instead of 1. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived by certified mail, the agency's law firm logo printed fancy on the corner. Why did the agency send lawyers after them? The timing seems connected to those forum posts. Did someone report back that survivors were talking? I'm really curious how Wong managed to deny medications at 2 a.m. when kids needed help. The cease and desist letter inside threatened to sue me for defamation if I kept spreading what they called false and damaging information about their operations. I scanned it immediately and forwarded it to Amina Farouk, the lawyer Shakira had found who worked with foster kids. Amina called me within an hour saying she'd take the case pro bono because she'd seen this intimidation tactic too many times before. Late that night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by all the evidence, feeling the weight of it crushing down on me. Maybe I should just let it go, move on with my life, stop digging up all this old pain that made my chest tight and my hands shake. My phone lit up with a text from Bradley. Can't stop thinking about that night, watching you on the floor, thought you were gonna die right there. His next message came quick. Don't let them get away with it. I went back to the agency website and started downloading every policy document I could find. Hundreds of pages of boring text that nobody ever reads. Buried on page 247 of an old employee handbook from Wong's time, I found it. The smoking gun we needed. Official policy stating supervisor bonuses were tied directly to achieving 0 medical incident months, with bigger bonuses for multiple months in a row. They literally paid people to deny us medicine, wrote it down in black and white like they were proud of it. My phone rang the next morning. Marek Kowalski from the State Investigation Unit, his voice careful and official. I understand you've been gathering information about the agency, he said. Clearly someone had told him about my digging. I need to advise you not to interfere with our ongoing review of their operations. He went on about proper channels and official procedures, more worried about his paperwork than the kids still stuck in the system. Thank you for the warning, I said politely, then hung up and went right back to searching through documents. 3 days later, my laptop pinged with an email that made my stomach drop. The parole hearing had been moved up a whole week because of scheduling conflicts, leaving us only 14 days to prepare everything. I pushed back from my desk so hard the chair hit the wall, my hands already shaking as I grabbed my phone to text the group. We'd planned on having more time to gather evidence, and now everything had to happen faster. The survivor meeting that night turned into a mess when I brought up the new timeline. Kiara started crying about not being ready to face Wong again, even through a written statement. Jordan stood up and slammed his fist on the table, saying we should just take whatever settlement the agency offered and be done with it. Bradley wanted to fight, but Shakira thought we should wait for the next parole hearing instead of rushing. The argument got louder until Jordan stormed out, kicking a chair on his way, and we all sat there in the broken silence knowing trauma had made us too damaged to agree on anything. I spent the next morning at the county records office going through old union grievance files from employees who worked under Wong. Page after page showed complaints about supervisors preventing staff from giving kids their medications, workers writing that they couldn't do their jobs properly. One nurse had filed 12 separate reports about being blocked from dispensing insulin and anxiety meds. The documents proved the staff knew what was happening but couldn't stop it without losing their jobs. By afternoon, word had spread through our support network that Wong's lawyer was building a defense around her being a scapegoat for the whole broken system. The lawyer claimed she was just following agency policies and bonus structures that existed before she arrived. My phone buzzed with messages from other survivors asking if this meant she'd get out early, their fear coming through every text. That evening, Kiara called me, her voice shaking so bad I could barely understand her at first. She'd written 5 pages about all the panic attacks she suffered without her medication, how Wong would laugh when she hyperventilated. Through her tears, she asked if her statement was good enough, if it would help keep Wong locked up. I told her she was the bravest person I knew, and her words would make a difference. After we hung up, I went back to the supply invoices I'd been collecting, spreadsheets showing medication orders for the group home over Wong's 5 years there. The pattern was obvious once you looked at the numbers. Every month, Wong reported 0 medical incidents. The medication orders dropped by half or more. They literally stopped buying our insulin, inhalers, and anxiety pills to save money and boost her bonus. The paper trail showed they chose profit over our lives, documented in their own records. My doctor called me in for an emergency appointment the next day after my latest blood work came back. She adjusted my insulin doses and added a new medication to help with the stress spikes that kept throwing my levels off. While writing the prescription, she asked if maybe I should step back from all this for my health. I promised her I'd be careful, but we both knew I was lying. That night, someone posted my sealed juvenile record on 3 different forums, the theft charges from when I was 14 highlighted in yellow. follow. The posts called me a criminal trying to get revenge on the woman who tried to help me. My face burned reading the comments calling me a liar and a thief. The scared kid who stole food because he was hungry didn't deserve to have his pain used against him like this. I stayed up until 4 in the morning writing my own version of events, scanning and uploading every document I had. Hospital records, glucose readings, witness statements, everything to prove what really happened that night. Within 6 hours, the post had been shared 400 times, with comments from foster kids all over the state sharing their own medication stories. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications, some calling me brave, others saying I was making it all up for attention. Former foster parents messaged me defending the system, saying they did their best with limited resources. Others admitted they knew something was wrong, but didn't know how to fight it. I turned off all my notifications and focused on organizing our evidence for the parole board, because the noise online didn't matter compared to keeping Wong from getting out early. My old foster mom from before the group home sent me a Facebook message that same night, saying she always worried about us kids in that place, but didn't know how to help. Another foster parent from years earlier wrote an angry email calling me ungrateful and saying Wong was just doing her job with limited resources. I started getting messages from foster parents all over the state, some apologizing for not speaking up, others defending the system and saying we were all troubled kids who made their jobs impossible. One couple who had me for 3 months when I was 12 sent a long letter explaining how the agency gave them no training, no support, and threatened to remove their license if they complained about anything. Reading their stories made me see how the whole system was broken. Not just Wong, but that didn't make what she did any less evil. 2 days later, Priya called asking if we could meet somewhere private to talk about what she saw at the group home. We picked a diner 40 minutes outside town where nobody would recognize us, and I drove there with my glucose monitor beeping every few minutes from the stress. She looked older than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking as she stirred sugar into her coffee. She told me about the meetings where supervisors explained how to deny medication requests, how they taught staff to write reports that made sick kids look like they were faking. Her voice broke when she described watching Jordan have a seizure while Wong stood there saying he was being dramatic for attention. She pulled out a notebook where she'd written down dates, times, and details of every incident she witnessed, saying she'd been too scared to report it then, but couldn't live with the guilt anymore. I took pictures of every page while she talked about the bonus structure, how Wong got $500 extra every month with 0 medical incidents, how other supervisors competed to see who could save the most on medication costs. She agreed to testify if needed and gave me her new phone number since she was worried about retaliation. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing non-stop with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Diego's article had run on the front page with the headline about systematic medical neglect in foster care, using our stories and documents as evidence. Local news stations wanted interviews, national outlets were asking for comments, and 3 different documentary producers left voicemails about filming our story. I turned my phone off and went to work, but my boss pulled me aside saying reporters had been calling the office asking about me. That afternoon, the agency sent out a press release announcing an immediate internal review and new 24-hour complaint hotlines for foster children. Seyoon did a press conference on the courthouse steps, his face serious as he promised swift action and comprehensive reform while never actually admitting anything was wrong. He talked about isolated incidents and individual bad actors, careful not to mention the systemic problems or take any real responsibility. The reporters ate it up, but anyone who'd lived through it could see the panic behind his polished words. Amina called me that evening with a different approach than the criminal case against Wong. She wanted to file a civil lawsuit against the agency itself, not for money, but for court-ordered policy changes that would protect future kids. She explained it would take years, cost thousands in filing fees even with her working free, and might not succeed, but it was our best shot at real change. This timing change for the parole hearing feels really calculated. Just when they're gathering evidence, someone decides there's suddenly a scheduling conflict. The way Wong's lawyer is already building this scapegoat defense makes me wonder who's really pulling strings behind the scenes. She sent me a draft complaint that named the agency, the State Oversight Board, and 3 supervisors, including Wong, as defendants. The document was 60 pages of legal language describing systematic denial of medical care, financial incentives for neglect, and failure to protect vulnerable children. We spent the next week gathering signatures from other survivors, collecting medical records, and organizing evidence into exhibits for the court. I drove to the courthouse with Bradley and Shakira to file the complaint, the clerk's eyes widening as she counted the pages and boxes of supporting documents. The filing fee was $800 that we'd raised through small donations from other foster care survivors who couldn't testify but wanted to help. 3 weeks later, I had to sit for my deposition in Amina's office, answering questions from the agency's lawyer for 6 hours straight. Halfway through describing that night on the floor, my hands started shaking and I couldn't catch my breath, my body convinced I was dying again, even though my glucose was fine. Yara had taught me to press my feet hard into the floor, to feel the carpet, not cold tile, to count 5 things I could see in the room that proved I was safe now. The lawyer kept pushing, asking if I was sure I wasn't exaggerating, if maybe I misremembered because I was so young, if I had any proof besides Besides my word, I stayed calm and stuck to facts, describing the monitor readings, the hospital records, the exact words Wong said while I was dying. That night, I sat at my kitchen table writing my statement for Wong's parole hearing, crossing out every angry word and replacing it with cold facts about ongoing medical costs and therapy bills. I wrote about the panic attacks when my glucose drops even slightly, the thousands of dollars in medical expenses from years of poor management, the job opportunities I lost from stress-related complications. Every sentence had to be perfect because the parole board would look for any reason to dismiss me as bitter or vengeful instead of damaged. The next day, Wong's lawyer sent copies of her letter to the parole board, claiming she was following standard procedures and maintaining necessary discipline in a chaotic environment. She wrote that she never intended harm, that she was overwhelmed by demanding children and impossible expectations, that the real failure was the system that put her in that position. Reading her words made me sick, the way she painted herself as a victim while never once saying sorry for nearly killing me. I stayed up all night searching through old state documents online until I found something that changed everything. An audit from 3 years before Wong started working there showed inspectors flagged the medication access system as dangerous and recommended immediate changes that never happened. The report detailed how locked medicine cabinets and restricted access could lead to medical emergencies, even suggesting 24-hour availability for critical medications, but the agency buried it to avoid costs. The morning of the parole hearing came faster than I wanted, and I stood outside the courthouse checking my glucose monitor 3 times before walking in. The hearing room was smaller than I expected, with wood panels and folding chairs that squeaked when people moved. Wong sat at a table near the front in a gray blazer, looking older and thinner, but still wearing that same cold expression from 8 years ago. My hands shook as I walked to the witness chair, even though I'd practiced my statement 100 times with Yara. I kept my voice steady, reading about the medical bills and panic attacks, and the job I lost when stress made my diabetes worse. Bradley went next, describing his asthma attacks when she locked up his inhaler. Then Shakira played parts of the recording on speakers that filled the room with Wong's voice saying we were all faking. Jordan testified about seizures returning after years without proper meds, while Kiara's mom read a statement about anxiety treatment that took years to fix what Wong broke. The board members shifted in their seats, and one kept clearing his throat like he wanted this to be over. Wong's lawyer argued she was following agency policies and deserved early release for good behavior in prison, but you could see the board wasn't buying it completely. They called a recess, and we waited in the hallway for 3 hours drinking bad coffee from a vending machine and checking our phones every few seconds. When they called us back, the decision came fast, with the board chair reading from typed pages about conditional parole with monthly check-ins and employment restrictions, keeping her away from any job involving kids or vulnerable people. She'd have to pay restitution to each of us, though the amounts were small compared to what we'd lost, and she couldn't leave the state without permission for 5 years. It wasn't the denial we wanted, but at least she'd never hurt another kid in a group home again. 2 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived from the agency's lawyers with settlement paperwork offering $50,000 to each survivor if we signed an NDA that basically meant we could never talk about what happened publicly again. Our group text exploded with arguments because some people needed that money for medical bills or school, while others wanted to keep fighting and telling our story to prevent more kids from suffering. Amina called an emergency meeting at her office where she explained we could counter offer with different terms instead of just accepting or rejecting everything. She spent hours on the phone with their lawyers going back and forth until they agreed to smaller payments of $20,000, but with a limited NDA that only covered specific internal documents, not our personal experiences. We could still do advocacy work and speak at conferences and push for policy changes as long as we didn't share certain financial records or employee files that came out during discovery. I chose the smaller payment to keep my voice free, while Bradley took the full amount because he had a baby on the way and needed the money more than the right to speak. Nobody judged each other's choices because we all knew survival looked different for everyone, and healing didn't follow the same path. The final settlement also required the agency to hire an independent monitor who would check medication access every month and review any complaints from kids about withheld meds. They had to post signs in every group home with a hotline number kids could call if staff denied them medicine, and create a digital log system that tracked every dose given or refused. These changes wouldn't bring back what we lost, but maybe they'd stop the next Wong from nearly killing a kid for bonus money. A month later, Wong's lawyer sent a cease and desist letter claiming I was harassing his client through my advocacy work, even though I'd never contacted her directly or mentioned her current location. Amina handled it with a sharp response about First Amendment rights and the difference between harassment and lawful speech about matters of public concern. Wong was still trying to paint herself as the real victim while we lived with the damage she caused every single day. During a planning meeting for a conference presentation, my glucose dropped to 62, which wasn't dangerous, but still made my hands shake and vision blur at the edges. Diego noticed first and grabbed juice from his bag, while Shakira checked my monitor and Bradley called out numbers to keep me focused on the present, not the past. Their calm response reminded me I wasn't alone anymore. anymore and didn't have to hide or fight through lows by myself. After I stabilized, we went back to work, planning our presentation about medication access in foster care like it was just another normal day, because in a way it was. The next week, I had to drive past the old group home for a meeting and saw it had been turned into a daycare called Sunshine Days with bright yellow paint and cartoon animals on the windows. Kids played on swings where we used to stand for morning count, and parents picked up toddlers from the same door we couldn't leave without permission. The building looked happy now with safety posters about food allergies and emergency contacts visible through the windows and no locks on the kitchen or medicine cabinets. Life had moved forward in that space, even while some of us stayed stuck in what happened there before. Terrell called me that afternoon, asking if we could meet at the coffee shop near his new job at the youth center. I drove over with my glucose kit in my pocket, a habit I couldn't break even after all these years. He was already there in his work polo shirt with the center's logo, stirring sugar into his coffee when I walked in. We sat across from each other for a minute without talking, both knowing what needed to be said. He told me straight up that he couldn't do the public testimony thing, but he was teaching kids every day about standing up for each other. I watched him pull out his phone and show me pictures of the teens he worked with, kids who looked just like we used to. He said every week he tells them about that night, about carrying me out while Wong screamed, about how saving someone changes you forever. I reached across the table and we shook hands, no more words needed between us. 2 days later, Shakira called with news that made my hands shake. The state had bought the rights to her iPod footage for their new training program on medical neglect in care facilities. Every new employee at every group home would have to watch our worst night and learn what not to do. She was getting paid enough to cover her therapy for the next 5 years, and they were naming the training module after all of us who survived. The local news ran a segment about it, but by the next week, nobody was talking about it anymore. A new scandal at the mayor's office took over the headlines, and our story became yesterday's news. The way Terrell teaches those kids about that night without doing public testimony is really interesting. How does sharing the story privately create a different kind of healing than speaking publicly? The changes we forced stayed in place though, with new policies and monitoring systems that would outlive any news cycle. I signed up to volunteer with a youth advocacy group that focused on medication rights for foster kids. Every Thursday night, I sat in their cramped office helping kids fill out complaint forms and navigate the system. One boy reminded me of myself at 14, checking his insulin pump nervously, while his foster mom insisted he was faking. I helped him file the paperwork and connected him with Amina, who took his case for free. More kids came each week, some with diabetes, others with seizures or anxiety, all of them fighting for basic medical care. I spent a whole weekend updating my victim impact statement for Wong's parole file. My laptop screen blurred as I typed out the ongoing effects, the therapy bills, the nights I still wake up tasting metal in my mouth. Every detail went into that document, because if she ever tried for early release, they needed to know the truth. I printed 3 copies and had them notarized, then mailed them to different offices to make sure nothing got lost. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was testing my blood sugar before breakfast. Wong had contacted 3 former colleagues at the agency, violating her parole terms about no contact with anyone from the foster system. The parole officer wanted to know if I'd attend the violation hearing, but I said no. Other people could handle this one while I focused on moving forward instead of backward. Our survivor group started meeting monthly at Shakira's apartment since she had the biggest living room. We'd order pizza and sit around talking about regular stuff like jobs and relationships, only sometimes mentioning the past. Bradley brought his baby once, and we all took turns holding her, this tiny perfect person who would never know what group homes were like. Jordan was taking night classes to become a social worker, and Kiara had started dating someone who understood her anxiety. We weren't trying to forget what happened, but we weren't letting it define every moment either. That night before bed, I checked my glucose like always, watching the number come up steady at 95. I grabbed my phone and typed into our group chat that I was good for the night. Within minutes, everyone responded with their own check-ins, some about medication, others just saying they were okay. Bradley sent a thumbs up emoji, and Shakira shared a funny video she found online. Terrell wrote that the youth center kids had asked about us again, and he'd told them we were all doing fine. Jordan mentioned her test was tomorrow, and Kiara said she'd finally made it through a week without a panic attack. My phone buzzed with their messages as I got ready for bed in my own apartment, where nobody controlled the medicine cabinet. I set my glucose monitor on the nightstand, next to a fresh pack of glucose tabs and my emergency kit. Everything I needed was within reach. Nobody could take it away, and tomorrow I'd wake up and help more kids fight for the same basic right. The phone kept lighting up with messages from the others, our broken little family still looking out for each other across the miles and years. Thanks for hanging out and wondering about all this with me today. It's been really interesting sharing these thoughts together. Take care, and if you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.